Welcome to our video on standard usage and English dialects. Hopefully by now you've finished the verbs pretest, which allows you to see some of the differences in the ways people speak English. Verb use is one of the most varied parts of speech, as you can see, and it is extremely difficult to change your preferred usage, especially in speech. For example, I've been a reader my whole life and a student most of my life, and I often find myself saying, I've drinking my coffee and I need a refill. Drinkin' isn't a standard usage word. It's a dialect word. And even though I know that that's true, it doesn't help me automatically change my usage. I still say it all the time and usually don't realize that I've said it. If I really wanted to change my usage and I wanted to stop saying the word drinkin', I would probably have to enlist my friends and family members to smack me every time I said it or resort some other drastic measure because I just don't hear myself saying it at all. So why don't I do that, you might be asking. After all, I'm an English professor. You would think that my use of a non-standard verb form would make others doubt my credentials or have some other kind of negative effect on my career. But the truth is, certain dialectic differences are more important socially than others are. That is, there are some errors that are less acceptable than others in academic and business situations. Linguists call these status marking errors, which means that certain errors mark you as lower class in our culture and others don't. Now, we don't like to talk about class differences here in America. Often we try to pretend they don't exist or just that everyone is middle class or something like that. But language is one place where class differences in our culture still definitely reveal themselves. Using verb constructions like he don't do such and such, or you be kidding, or they seen something, or we ain't. Those could affect a person's job prospects, especially for positions with high public visibility. Are these verb constructions objectively any better or worse than standard constructions? Like he doesn't, you are, they saw, and we are not? No, they all communicate equally well. It's just that some are accepted in formal situations and others aren't. Same with clothing. Suit jackets are not inherently better clothing than sportswear, but we've decided as a culture that they are acceptable in some situations and the sportswear in others. Of course, clothing is easy to change. Anyone can easily take off a jersey and put on a suit jacket. Language is much more difficult to change, as I mentioned earlier with my example of drinking. If you've grown up speaking a dialect other than the standard one, then you're going to have a much tougher job to make yourself acceptable in academic, business, and political realms. And that seems unfair to me. It's one of the main factors, actually, I think, that keep wealthy families wealthy in our country and poor families poor generation after generation. This is basically the premise of the movie My Fair Lady, if you've seen that. By changing her speech, Eliza Doolittle transforms herself from a poor street vendor into a highborn proper lady. Of course, she has to work very hard to do it. She has to take lessons and put marbles in her mouth, and it basically takes the whole movie, but she manages it in the end. So the question you might be asking here is, why are we talking about this in a grammar class? Why is this important to talk about? I think that in a class about changing the ways we speak and write, it's worthwhile to take a few minutes to think about why. Is it fair that the language of certain groups is called correct and the language of other groups is stigmatized as ugly or improper or bad or wrong? Research indicates that what we call standard English is not more complex or more precise or more nuanced than any other English dialects. It's not objectively better. It's just the dialect that people with influence and power happen to speak, and so they decided it was the correct one. They owned the schools, they owned the printing presses, and so they wrote the dictionaries and style manuals and handbooks and textbooks and made everyone else speak like them. And here we are, hundreds of years later. Okay, that's a little exaggerated, but you get the point. So obviously I'm not saying that we should all stop learning standard usage and drop out of this class and go write and speak however you want. But I do want to kind of poke at the notion that standard English is somehow right and other ways of speaking are wrong. As a culture, we've chosen this dialect to be the one that we use to communicate in business and law and academia and journalism. And if you want to be successful in those places, you have to learn it, standard English. But other dialects are not ugly or bad. It's not ugly or bad to say, she brung something to the party, or there ain't no reason that such and such, or I might could do that. It's just different. As you read chapter 23, along with learning the content from this chapter, I'd like you to be on the lookout for language in the textbook that is pejorative. That is, language that makes it sound like non-standard dialects are bad or wrong in some way. Textbooks have come a long way in recognizing the validity of other dialects, but textbook writers and professors still sometimes fall into the error of thinking that our own dialect is just better and more beautiful than other people's. So as you think further about this issue, and as you begin to notice some of those things in our textbook, head over to the discussion board to talk about it and ask questions. This is a topic of particular interest to me, and so I'd really love to discuss and continue the discussion with anyone who's interested in talking about it further.